All right. How are we doing, everybody? I want to talk about something really interesting today. And it's day 14 now. We're one day away from halfway through this challenge, which is crazy. Today I want to talk about something that's really interesting to me. Something I've heard a lot of people talk about, especially if you come from a slightly more conservative background. You'll hear people talk about how video games are causing violence and stuff. And I want to talk about basically desensitization and video games in general. So we'll start with desensitization and the claim that video games cause violence to be desensitized, which creates more violence in the world. And then we'll talk about video games in general. Go check me out on Instagram for like daily uploads. I post there like 3 to 5 times every single day. I post on TikTok as well. Don't look at TikTok, it's stupid. And then also, follow and subscribe. Like and subscribe to this video, I guess, if you enjoy it. So there's a claim that's made, and one of the big things that turns people off of playing video games, basically, which is video games cause a higher rate of violence in young people because it desensitizes you to actual real-life violence. And if you're in a video game and you're in like a first-person shooter game where you're shooting guns at people, it causes this desensitization to, shooting people, basically. It causes violence. If you're in a video game where you're going around beating people up, it causes this desensitization. The interesting thing is, I've always thought that's kind of weird, because why would that cause desensitization? Why would that cause such an increase in crime or in violence? Why would video games be blamed for violence when there's been way more violence in the past? And what I mean by that is, for instance, if you go back to, the era of the Bible, for instance, where in the Old Testament, where they're constantly fighting wars, I mean, the people were surrounded by violence constantly, and it wasn't fake violence, it was real world violence. They were going to wars, they were killing people in person, and it was incredibly violent. The other thing, then you go to like the Middle Ages, there was the Knights, the Crusades, an incredibly violent time. There's pretty much all throughout history we've lived through very violent periods, and I don't think that causes this I don't think desensitization causes people to go out and commit heinous acts. And what I mean by that is, like, you see someone who's gone out and done a school shooting or something, and it's like, oh, well, he played these video games when he was a kid, he played these shooting games, and that's what caused this violence. And it's like, actually, that's probably not the case. Because here's the thing, if you're a psychopath or a sociopath, you're someone who actually is going to go and commit some crazy crime, you don't need to be desensitized to the violence to do it. The only thing that desensitization might cause is a more relaxed feeling around it, right? Whereas for almost every single person who's sane and rational, we can sense a difference between something that's real and something that's not real. Our brain automatically creates that sense. So you can watch a violent movie every day of the week and not be any more likely to go out and actually shoot someone in the face. You can play a violent video game and not be any more likely to go out there and start beating up people on the street because you saw it on the video game. And the studies have been done that show, for instance, doctors who spend a lot of their time, covered in blood. They're surgeons. They're actively working on people. They see a lot of death and gore, for instance. They are not more likely to go out and cause death and gore because we have a moral inhibitor in our brain that goes, that is actually wrong, and we would never actually go and do that. Now, we might be more comfortable seeing it, and that's what desensitization is. You're more comfortable to see the violence, but it doesn't make you even 1 ounce more likely to go out and commit that violence in real life, because we know that's wrong. You should not be doing that in real life. Whereas for the only case study that has been shown to actually where video games or violent movies could cause a more likelihood to go out and do something evil is possibly in children who are from violent homes, who show aggression at a really, really young age, who are already possibly psychopaths, or they have the tendency to create violence already. We see that when they play these video games, it sort of just reinforces to them the fact that it's actually really easy. And so for the average person, it's never going to create that effect. To do something violent, we need several things. You need to be angry or passionate. You need to have your moral inhibitions taken away, so either under the influence or just soulless, without a conscience. And you need to be able, you need to have some means to do it, some motive behind it. And so someone who goes and plays a violent video game and then goes out into the street with a gun and shoots somebody, that's not going to happen for 99.9% of people. That's not going to be the case, because we know what's wrong, and we know the difference between cartoon gunfire on a screen and a real life killing, right? We know that that's evil and wrong. So you need a lack of empathy to actually commit a terrible crime, and being desensitized to violence does not take away your empathy. Another interesting thing that I learned about this when I was studying this a bit, because I was very interested, right, was that typically psychopaths, or people who are going to commit these horrible crimes, they have a history of violence already, and so they start with, animals or insects, and then they move to animals, and then they move to hurting, people younger or weaker than them, and then they move on to actually killing people. And it's because they have this satanic desire for violence, and that is not caused by a video game, that's caused by Satan. So there's almost no connection between playing a violent video game, watching a violent movie, and actually committing violent acts. Just like there's no connection between a doctor who, is arguably desensitized to death and gore and blood. There's no connection between that and a doctor going out and killing people, because there's just an obvious difference, right? No difference between someone who's in the military and is actively fighting a war for a cause and killing some random innocent civilian, right? However, I do want to move, because I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. I am not pro video game whatsoever. I do think there are benefits to certain movies, war movies. There's a lot of war movies that have great messages and great stories, and I'm not against those whatsoever. But I am pretty against video games. So to move on, we've kind of covered desensitization, and it's just interesting to me that while movies and video games can remove the shock value, because desensitization basically just means when you first see something for the first time, it shocks you, and your dopamine goes off, or your shock receptors go off, you're startled and you react. But the 50th time you see someone shooting a gun in front of you, you don't have that same shock response. But that shock response is not at all related to physical acts. And something very interesting that I heard recently was, for men especially, throughout all of human history, we've had this desire. Men have the built-in desire to conquer, to create, to explore, to discover new things, to rule, to be leaders, to have power. And you can see that throughout history, right? You get some dictator comes up, he's in power, he conquers the whole earth. Alexander the Great, boom, someone else comes up. Genghis Khan. All of these leaders, their desire to conquer and rule, and the wars that are fought, and men going to war. I mean, you see it in World War II. America gets attacked. All of America's young men rise up with the testosterone-fueled fury to fight back, right? And it's something that's built into men to survive and to protect their themselves and their own families, and then an extension of the family would be the community. The extension of the community is your country. So, when your country gets attacked, you want to protect it and defend it, and that's just how men are designed. And they say there's some studies coming out showing that in recent years, men use video games almost as an outlet for this testosterone. Because instead of going to wars and fighting, that doesn't happen as much in our Western world. Obviously, there's still wars going on in different parts of the world, but in our Western world, we're not going to war nearly as much, right? So we're almost releasing that testosterone through the violent movies and the violent video games, which let you act out war and violence without actually committing it. And I don't say that to say that's good. I'm just saying it's interesting that we've kind of substituted video games for real life war, essentially. And it's a very interesting topic for me. And I do want to speak in the future, maybe tomorrow or sometime next week. I want to talk about pacifism and how pacifism and the Bible connect and stuff. I want to talk about that. So we'll talk about that maybe next week sometime. I'm not going to get into that today. But yeah, I just wanted to, mention that it's a very interesting point that we've possibly replaced war with violent games and movies. Now to move on to actually what I think about video games, I think video games are an incredible waste of time. And if you are trying to get somewhere in life and you are addicted to gaming, because I believe gaming addictions are absolutely true, you need to get off that immediately. You need to shut down your computer, you need to delete your games, uninstall them, lock down your computer, and start actually doing something with your life. However, there is one caveat I'd like to put here, which is just because video games are on a computer does not mean they are not any less creative or less good for you than a board game or a movie. Essentially, a video game, you're doing more actual thinking and actions than you are in a movie when you're just sitting back and letting the story flow into you. So the people who say that video games are just terrible for you, there's actually a lot of good things. Your motor skills can be increased with video games, your coordination, hand-to-eye coordination, and just reflexes and reaction timing for the base. Now, I'm not defending video games, I'm just saying you can't say they're completely bad or completely useless. And I think there are some great aspects of it, like when you spend some time with your family, as a family or as your brothers, playing together. I think there's no problem with that. I think that's a lot of fun. I think that can be a great way to spend some of your downtime. But if you're spending like once a week, maybe twice a week for a couple hours, you're spending more than that playing video games, you're seriously wasting your life. You need to get off the computer. You need to get off playing those hours. You need to start logging your hours. When you look at your computer log and you see that you've spent over 100 hours on a game, you got to ask yourself, could I have been doing that? Could I have been doing something a little bit more productive with that time? And even reading books is just infinitely more productive than video games or movies. And I say the same thing about movies. If you're spending hours and hours and hours of your life watching movies or shows every single day, that's pretty unproductive, and you could seriously be doing something better with your life. Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. I'm not pro video game. I think there's some benefits to them. I think they're a lot of fun. I think you can use them in good ways at times. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend you in fact, I would highly recommend you don't spend all your time addicted to gaming. But I just thought that was interesting. I've been learning about desensitization. Let me know what you think about desensitization, that topic, in the comments. And if you think I'm wrong, let me know. I'm glad to hear it. I always like discussing different opinions. So, yeah, that's all.